Very excited to have the second Bringing Your College Application to Life webinar with you. We had our first one on Sunday, and we were joined by hundreds of families, and super excited to have another pretty full house. We'll keep today's session around 20 to 30 minutes and absolutely open to any questions. No question is a dumb question when it comes to college applications. It's one of the biggest decisions you will make in your life, and it will, determine your career path probably, and your friend group, and potentially a few other things as well. So without further ado, my name is DEVI. I founded Ascend now close to 6 years ago. We have worked with over 9,000 students across different areas. Some are college counseling, academic preparation, IB examination technique, and beyond academic courses, otherwise known as profiling or resume building. A little bit more about that later. I have personally worked with over 1,000 students. My main passion is really helping students figure out what makes them tick, what they're excited about, who they are, and how to kind of realize that at a young age. I used to work at Goldman Sachs in investment banking in New York previously, and I've been working with students for close to 11 years. I do a lot of public speaking at different international schools and universities. I graduated from Georgetown University, which is a university I work with closely. In fact, I sit on the Club of Singapore board, and I organize a lot of events as well as do a lot of recruiting. So love to introduce my team. Some of them are here, some of them are not. Millie is based in the UK. She heads our UK office. She is the person to contact if you have any questions about our programs, or you'd like to know more information about our courses. We also have RT Pundit, who can put her contact on the chat, as well as Kajal Bansali, who sit in Singapore and in Belgium, respectively. Both RT and Kajal have kids that we have sent to university, and they're more than happy to answer questions that should you have anything. Then, of course, we have Ethan, my longest colleague, close to 5.5 years that I know him, and he heads a group of teachers of over 130. And then we have Faiza, who is our head of college counseling. So very excited to meet everyone. Gonna keep today's session more informative so that you guys can really take away some standard, takeaways in today's call. So the first thing I want to highlight, and this is a really important point, because a lot of the parents come to me and they share, oh, well, my child is, competing with the best students in China or in India. But actually, the way that the university process works is, depending on where you apply, that is your competition. So if I'm applying from Singapore, my competition most likely is my existing school and the schools around me within my radius. So if I'm applying from a school like SAS, Singapore American School, most likely my competition is, the different schools around me and students in my school. The way that universities do this is they have subcommittees dedicated to different geographies. So they'll have a subcommittee dedicated to north of Singapore, south of Singapore, east, west of Singapore. And then the same committee will review all applications within that jurisdiction to ensure that there is a fair and consistent review. As you guys all know, schools report grades in very different ways. And so this is sort of a consistent, fair way that universities typically do this. This is not the case for every university, but this is the case for more universities. And for anyone on this call, if you guys want to connect with specific universities, Faiza on my team is a member of the International Association of College Counselors, and she has access to almost any university that you would like to meet. So that's someone you should definitely connect with, and you can ask Millie, RT, or Kajal for that information. The other second, thing I just want to highlight, and I highlighted this on Sunday, but I think this is important to highlight as well. Pay attention to the patterns and trends of the kids within your school and where they get into university. For example, are they getting into Georgetown or George Washington or Columbia? That usually means, not always, but usually means that those schools have higher acceptance rates for those high schools. So, for example, the school, Singapore American School, has typically had a lot of acceptances at the Northeastern University. Is that a trend? Is that a pattern? Or is that, something beyond that. And this is something you won't always be able to tell, but it's just something to keep in mind. And I can share more about that if you have any questions. Okay, what's important to US universities? I discussed this on Sunday, so I'm not going to go through huge details here, but roughly there's 6 categories that are very important to when you're applying to university. The first and the most important, as you probably know, your academics, your grades, how you're performing in school. And this is calculated in a grade point average or a GPA. The grades that matter are grade 9, 10, 11, and 12. And this is something that really is sort of that baseline requirement. So, if you're thinking of a house and a gate, and you're thinking of the house being the university and the gate being in front of the house, the academics is sort of the gate. It's the gate opener. So you will really only have, a decent chance at a top university with some decent grades. However, big however here, these can be compensated by what we call a very good profile or a very good resume. So ECAs, otherwise known as extracurriculars, what students do outside of school. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in detail as to how to find that out, right? That's super important. Then, of course, there's the athletic. Are you a captain in your volleyball team? Are you a captain in your swimming team? Universities, by and large, like to see some type of athleticism. It doesn't have to be. Some students get into top universities. Just yesterday, we had a student get into Yale. She had no sports. She's never done sports in her life. But by and large, having some sort of, athletic experience is good. Then we have the personal, which is the most subjective of all, which is really who is the person, right? Outside of academics, outside of ECs, who is the person and how can this person contribute to my university? And I will add some more details to this as well. And then we have the recommendation letters. Again, every university requires 2 letters of recommendations, usually from teachers. Sometimes it can be from a mentor or an internship supervisor or a job supervisor, but usually it's from a teacher. So this is something I always advise to my students. Try to identify, if you're in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, try to identify which teachers really know you and which teachers do you feel can really add value to your application. Super important. And one little caveat here is you won't necessarily know how the letter is written because the letter gets sent directly to the university. And we can send some samples of this as well in terms of what is deemed to be a good letter. Finally, we have interviews. Interviews is the most sort of controversial one. A lot of families and students come to me and say, oh, well, interviews is not that important. We can just do an okay job in the interviews. I kind of disagree with that. I think that interviews can only add to your application. So if you do a really good interview, and if you're on the cusp of getting accepted or not, this can really add to your application. You never know who the alumni is that's interviewing you. When I applied to Georgetown, I got interviewed by one of the most sort of involved alumni at Georgetown. And I think that because I did so well in my interview, I didn't do well in my SATs, but I did well in my interview and my extracurriculars, I got in. So this is just a personal example to share with you. And this has been years ago. This is like 15 years ago, but it's important. So do prepare for these. And I won't touch upon how to prepare for these today, but if you have any questions, I can answer a few towards the end of today's webinar. So this is just to remind everyone, this is an example of a student who had good grades, had an okay SAT, not so good, but she had an amazing resume. She did a lot of cool things. She started a company, it's called Food Flip, and its aim is to recycle food wastage and redistribute to underprivileged communities. You can see here some of the communities she's impacted. In only 2 years, she donated over 123,000 pieces of bread and $35,000 of food. And that shows impact, that shows scalability, that shows a student who's willing to make a dent, right? And to me, that shows, to a university, that shows a student who can contribute to my university. She got accepted to 7 out of 10 universities. She's now at Northwestern in her first semester. So today's focus is going to be a little bit more on the common application and a little bit more on the activities. On Sunday, I touched upon the system and how to strategize the system and what are the things you should think about, right? As a parent, as a student, what are the things that you can control in the application process? Today is going to be a little bit more on how to identify your passion or your project and what is important in that essay side. What do you need to write about? And how does that writing style differ perhaps from IB English or AP English or AP Lit? So the first thing to note is most universities in the US, not all, they're part of something called the Common Application. The Common Application is one portal where all students can apply to all universities. So this is not the case for every single university in the US, but maybe like 90+%. So what you would do as a student is you would make an account here. Typically, you would do this at the end of grade 11. And at the end of grade 11, you'll have an account. Then you can add all the universities that you want to apply to, and then you can submit all your requirements. Well, something really important to share here. You have typically one main essay to write on the Common Application. That main essay, otherwise known as your personal statement, that is your story. That is really who you are, how you can contribute to the university, what's your story, something that's not formulaic, that's not structured, but at the same time that demonstrates your personality and the way you think. That's otherwise known as the personal statement. This goes to every single university. In addition to that, most universities, not all, they have something called supplemental essays. Supplemental essays can range from what's your favorite word and why, or tell me about a time where you were challenged, or tell me about one of your greatest failures, or tell me about your favorite book. These are essays that are really designed to get to know you as a person, right? Tell me why you want to attend Babson College. What is your reason? What is your motivation? Each university has about 3 to 5, sometimes more, per university. So if you're applying to 10 universities, you're really looking at like 30 to 40 essays that are extra. It's a lot of work. It's not something that's super straightforward. And every essay needs to be thoughtful. It can't be so straightforward. There needs to be something in depth that you share in these essays. So that's on the essay side. So you have your main personal statement, and then you have your supplemental. I should add, some of you on the call are art students. Art students have to usually submit a portfolio in addition to this, an art portfolio. If you're a film student, you have to submit a film portfolio. So it does vary school to school. If you're a student athlete, you have to send a student athlete report, which is a different application. But by and large, this is what you have to submit. So these two pieces, start early. Don't start at the middle of 12th grade because you will be swamped. Typically, I will put this in the chat. If you're looking at like a timeline, so let's say you start grade 12, right? In September to October, November, that's when you work on your early decision or early action applications. And what that means is just it's applications that you can apply early and you will find out early. The difference between early decision and early action, again, I think most of you know this, early decision is binding, early action is not binding. What that means is if I apply to Boston College, early decision, and I get in, admitted, then I have to go. I have no choice. I have to withdraw all my other applications. Early action means I apply early, I am notified early, but I don't have to go. It's non-binding. So this is just something to pay attention for, quite important. So typically the deadline for early action and early decision, it varies, but typically it's around November 1 to November 15th. So this is grade 12, guys. So, if you're in grade 11 now, that would be next year in November. Then you have your regular decision. Your regular decision is a bit later. Your regular decision is typically January 15th. That's your regular decision. And you find out in around April, sometimes earlier. That's when you get notified. So in general, my recommendation is always, not always, but try to apply early, because it just saves you a lot of stress as a student. You find out earlier, you can relax earlier, and you just really know. I mean, last night I was supposed to go to one of my students' houses who got into Boston College, but unfortunately I'm a bit unwell, so I couldn't go. But he's so happy, right? Because he knows he's going to Boston College. He's worked super hard, and now he can kind of take it easy. Similarly, I have a couple of other students who got Oxford and Cambridge offers, and now they're like, quite relaxed. So it's just something for us to think about. Again, I'm not talking about UK in today's call, but this is just something as a student, as a parent, be mindful that you can make your child's life a little bit easier by applying early and just being good with time, right? Which is one of the most painful things in life, isn't it? Okay, so essays. Then you have what's known as your activity list, which I will show you in a second, that you have to submit. Then you have your grades. Then you have your letter of recommendation, a video, and some additional information. This is just in terms of how, what you need to apply. Okay, so that's the common application. Now, in terms of like how you present your information, it's very important to present it in a way that shows impact, that shows scale, right? So I'm gonna actually use my annotation again. Okay, so when you submit your activities on Common App, you typically have 10 slots to fill in all the activities you've done from grade 9 to 12. So that's quite a lot, right? And you have to explain what are the leadership positions that you had, how many years did you do it for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Very important. How you present this is more important than what you've done. I see this like time and time again, where students basically they write what they have done in the most unimpactful, intangible way. And unfortunately, they don't get into the universities they thought they would. So let me give you an example. This is a student who got into quite a few schools. She got into Brown, she got into Georgetown, she got into Michigan, she got into Tufts. She didn't get into any other Ivy Leagues other than Brown, but this is how her application looked. And we have different profiles and applications we can also send after this call, or you can ask Millie or RT or team for. So I want to show you how it's presented. So you have to do 10 of these. These are just 4, but I want to show you how she's done it. So her first activity is varsity or JV equestrian horse rider. And here you will see that you have to put how many years you've been involved in that activity. So she's been involved in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, how many hours per week she's done it, how many weeks per year, and is it a continuous thing? Is it something she stopped, etc. So the first area is you put like the what you've done, right? The activity. Then you put the impact. And you can see the impact here is already very clear. Train daily as a national and international competitive rider. Champion of the year, dressage rider of the year. This tells a university she's a leader. She has won international competitions and she's a leader. Similarly here, you can see UWC grade ambassador, peer support high school ambassador. She's done something in leadership at her school. She leads the school tours. And by the way, a grade ambassador is not a hugely leadership oriented activity. It's something that is a leadership activity, but it's not something that's like captain of school or something like that. However, the way that she's written the activity is really important, because you can see she said led school tours, welcoming committee, and organized mental health programs for 1,000 students. This tells a university, wow, she has achieved scale, she has achieved impact, she has achieved results, right? So that's something really, really important as potential applicants to think about. Faiza on our team is really good in terms of advising students how to write this, but in general, it's not rocket science. You don't need a counselor for this piece of the application. Just show impact, show scale, show something that has achieved beyond the activity itself. Here you can see she started a passion project. This is super impactful, by the way. This is probably the most impactful out of her whole application. She started a project to impact women in Nigeria. She said to me, I want to impact 150,000 women in Africa, which is where I'm from, and I want to provide them with food and sanitation. And my goal is to impact a minimum of 150,000 women. So we brainstormed and said, how are we going to do that? So we wrote cold call emails on LinkedIn, and we did some cold calls to companies like L'Oreal, Glossier, Colgate, Mars, Cadbury. And a couple of companies replied, 4 companies replied, P&G, Mars, L'Oreal, and Colgate, and they decided to donate food and sanitation and some beauty products to these women. And we made a video out of it, and it became really the bulk of her essays. It became what she wrote in her essays. And most importantly, guys, this became a project that changed her mindset. Okay, it got her into university, but it also helped her acquire skills. It also helped her acquire perseverance, adaptability, entrepreneurial skills that are important for life. So that was her third project. Then we realized, okay, we don't really have many things with writing, right? So we said, okay, we're going to do something with writing. So we decided to write a couple of articles on Thrive Global, which is a Huffington Post platform. It's like a blog of Huffington Post. And on those articles, she wrote about this project. She wrote about the importance of languages and linguistic abilities and a couple of other pieces. And then she got published on that website. So this is an activity, again, that maybe took a couple of hours, but she did it spread out, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, and it shows some sort of credibility and impact. And it's an additional piece of information that universities can look into. Okay, I realize I'm speaking very slow. Maybe not, but I'm going through the content quite slowly today. So I want to share with you guys what's like a good roadmap, okay? What are the kind of things you should think about in terms of month on month, year on year? This is an example of a student. She's grade 11 and she's at boarding school, and we built out a roadmap for her in terms of what she should be considering every sort of month. And I know that it's sort of a really hectic time for students, so we want to make sure that their work is balanced and evened out, and they have a good profile, they have good grades, they have everything, but they're also mentally feeling okay, right? Super, super important. I was telling someone the other day, I have a student who's now in Princeton, and her dream was always to go to Princeton, and she just finished her first year, and now she wants to transfer to another school because she's unhappy and she wants to go to a second-tier school, something a little bit less intensive. So, to the parents out there, to the students out there, yes, the names are important, but if I could give you any advice, is go somewhere that will make you happy. Go somewhere that you will meet the best friends of your life. Go somewhere where you will, meet some of the best professors. But somewhere that's your environment. Not every environment is everyone's cup of tea, and that's okay. So this is the timeline for Rachel, and this is how we roadmapped it out. So remember what I was saying, sort of a couple of important things. There's your academic grades, your profile, your standardized tests. So the way we broke it down for her is we just broke it down grade by grade by grade. So for example, in grade 10, we're focusing on the AP Chinese exam. On the profile side, she's doing a history research paper on the Edo feudal hierarchy in Japan. She's starting with her first passion project with some kind of social impact. I think she's going to be doing something in beauty. She wants to make underprivileged women feel beautiful. So she's going to partner with a makeup brand to help women that are underprivileged feel beautiful and provide them mini makeup kits like eyeliner and eyeshadow and lipstick and things like that. And her whole premise is that even if you're an underprivileged woman, you should still feel beautiful. You should still feel like your worth is great. So that's her project. And then we have her college application. So you can see here, we're going to make a list of all the schools that she's going to apply to. We will also introduce her to some people within our network and, make sure she meets them. Then we have, the grade 11, which is, your academic focus, and then start with passion project 2, apply to these programs, etc. So you see how we kind of break it down. So it actually doesn't feel like so much, right? When it's broken down in an organized way. I highly recommend, if you're a student on this call, if you're a parent, try to break down the next 3 years, 4 years for your kid, or if you're a kid, try to break it down for yourself, just so you know what's kind of the priority within that set of time. There is no more important skill in high school, in middle school, than time management. Actually, there is no more important skill in life than time management, I would say. So, that is something just to consider. So yeah, so I mean, when thinking about the process, we have, the projects, the internships, research papers, articles, volunteering. And then after that, we go through looking up universities, finding an appropriate college list, writing the college essays, and then completing the standardized tests. A lot of parents ask me, should we take the SAT? Should we not take the SAT? My short answer, and sorry to be annoying here, is it really depends. It depends on whether you apply for for an art program or something like that. I would not do the SAT. But if you're applying for an engineering program, if you're applying to a school where SAT is optional, if it's mandatory, Georgetown, for example, it's still mandatory. So students that do not take their SAT cannot apply to Georgetown. So I think these are some of the things to consider. If you're not a good test taker, don't do it, because there's nothing to lose. I've had students get into UPenn without taking the SAT once. So don't worry too much about that piece. Control what you can control, and just be strategic and smart about how you use your time. Okay, this is an interesting little kind of exercise, and I'm just going to share my screen here. A lot of students ask me, how do I come up with a project? How do I come up with a passion project? I don't know what my passion is, etc., etc. So this is a little bit of a tool that we created, and we've been using this with our students sometimes. It's more of a brainstorming tool for students to figure out what they're interested in and how they can turn it into a passion. And I said this on Sunday, and I really live by this. Every student is interested in something. Maybe they won't tell you if you're a parent, and that's okay, but they're interested in something. And there's a way to make their interest into, a project, into something meaningful and impactful. So by and large, most passion projects start with a problem, meaning trying to solve a problem, right, for the better. So we have these different categories, and a lot of these problems, can be problems that student faces. These can be UN SDGs. These can be problems faced by adults, common gaps. I mean, there's so many problems in the world, right? So the way we do this is, and this is a tool we can probably share with everyone as well, we've put here different kind of areas where there are problems. There are problems in education, in fashion, in health, and within each of these, there are different ideas that students can think about. So let's say we go to education. So there's K-12 education, college education, lifelong community service. Let's say the student is interested in K-12 education, then they can, look into academics, skills education. They can look into whether they start an app, a product, a service. But let's say a student is really interested in college education, okay? So if they're interested in college education, and this is one of our students who is now in university, she's in her second year now. Her name is Portia. She wanted to start a company to help other kids get internships. And she said, okay, I want it to be an activity, something where I can help other students. And she said, okay, I can do something that can be like advice or a newsletter, or I can do a service. I can create a product or service that can really help students. So she created Intern Ed, which is a company that helps kids get virtual internships. And you can see here some of the companies here. They are the partners of her company, Intern Ed. And these are different students that have, done her internships, and you can see them on the call. And they said that they would recommend, her program. And, it really gave her a lot of confidence and a mindset, right? So this is just one example. Let's say we're looking into food and fashion. Let's say we're doing fashion. So some students can, say, okay, I want to do an online store, I want to do a retail store. And this is, these are the projects I'm doing, I'm looking into. So fashion is one example. These are two students, two girls. They're now a bit older, and they started a company called Hand Over Chic. Hand Over Chic is intended to help students buy tie-dye t-shirts, and they've made over like $16,000-$70,000 in revenue. So this was their project. Again, something they were very passionate about, and they did this project, by the way, in 8th grade, 7th and 8th grade, so super young. And again, these are good projects to do because it's not about the project, it's about the experience. You will learn to fail, you will learn to adapt, you will learn to build a mindset. These are all important skills, skills of the future. Then we have another student, Alicia, who's also now in university. She started an app called Fitness for Goodness, where she encourages senior citizens, adults to work out and exercise and impact. And it's a nonprofit, and they've raised over $12,000. So these are just examples, you can share with your kids, or if you're a student, you can kind of look into these examples and see which kind of projects do you want to create, because there's so many ideas out there. I have a student now, Steph. She's starting a company called Meno Unite to democratize information on menopause. And she interviews doctors, neuroscientists, and she creates these articles on menopause, and she shares them with women in the menopausal age group. Very impactful, right? So this is another company called Upgrade, a student started to provide e-services for small businesses. And she's felt helped for businesses. She's now at Babson College. She's very happy. And these are some of the companies she's worked with. So a lot of different ideas, and let's not restrict your passion projects to these, but these are just ideas that students can think, kind of start with and play around with. Okay, I'm going to do one more slide, and then I'm going to open it up to questions. So the last thing I want to talk about a little bit are the essays. The essays are one of the most important pieces of the application. I can't go super in depth in this because it will take hours, and I'm sure everyone wants to sleep. So the essays, let me just give my pointers on the essays, because I think some of these are applicable across geography and also across university. The first thing is, the more authentic you can be, the better. They don't need to know how many awards you've gotten, or how good grades you've gotten, or how much of academic caliber you have. They already know that. They already see that in your grades. What admissions is really looking for, and I was talking about this to a UPenn admissions friend on a podcast a couple of months ago, what they really care about is who you are. What is your story? Storytellers rule the world is a saying, and I think it's a saying for a reason, because it is something that can really impact people beyond words, right? The 3 kind of questions you should ask after your essay is written, or after your draft is written, is 1, do I come across as likable in the essay? Airport test. Admissions officers don't want to see kids that are super snooty and snobby and know they're the best and, are super amazing. No, they want to see someone human. They want to see someone they can be at the airport with for 10 hours. They want to see someone they like and they can relate to. At the same time, Does the student think differently, right? Can the student think a bit differently? Thirdly, can the student contribute to my university? Can they add value? I was just at a coffee with two of the Georgetown representatives, and we were just talking a little bit about, how do kids contribute to universities? And there are a lot of ways to think about it. One could be, will the student support the alumni network after? Will the student give back to my university? Will the student, bring up new ideas or clubs in the university? There are a lot of different ways to think about that. In terms of topics, you don't need to write about like something super abstract or something super philosophical. The best essays I've seen and read and worked on are the ones that are about really simple topics. I had a student who got into Yale early, and she wrote about running. She wrote about the freedom in her brain and the creativity unlocks in her brain when she runs. Every morning, she does a 6-mile run in the botanical gardens, and she talks about that. I've seen students talk to their grandmother, talk about faith, talk about music therapy. I have a student who's now at Brown. She wrote about music therapy. She started an app for senior citizens to share with them the therapy and the benefits of listening to music. And she impacted over 600 senior citizens with her app. It is not about what you write, it is about how you write. This cannot be closer to the truth, than in this case. I also think the last point is, what you write about in your essay, it doesn't have to be the same as what you put in your activities. It can be different, but your whole application can make sense. And by what I mean by that is, if you write an essay on running and then in your activities you have nothing about sports, that could be a bit strange, right? So there should be some relatability. Again, in university applications, there's so much subjectivity. I have, very strong opinions about resume and profile. I've seen a lot of kids get into university without the best grades, by the way, but with very good projects and very good essays. And I've also seen students with very good grades get into not as many universities with bad profiles. So I've seen quite a lot. And I think that there is a little bit of mystery to it. There is a little bit of unknown. But by and large, if you do sort of the things that I'm sharing with you on your own or with your school counselor or with your parents, you're already a step forward. So to conclude, I'm going to open it up to questions. So you can already type your questions into the chat if you have any. It's never really too early to start. A lot of families ask me, okay, is 8th grade too early? Is 7th grade too early? My answer is always the same. It's never too early to start figuring out your passion. If you're a student, figure out what you're interested in. Go all out, dream big, make it impactful, make it exciting. We have a 13-year-old, Emma Surya, who has books on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles, right? She's so young, but she's writing books, not for the college application, just because it's her passion. Will she use it for her college application? Probably, but it's just part of her kind of learning and her growth. So don't restrict, the learning to what's being taught at school, rather open that exposure to students. The second thing is, and this is more on Sunday's webinar, so if you weren't part of Sunday's webinar, send me a note or Ethan or Millie a note, and we can send you the link. Understand the system. Then, of course, be authentic, be yourself, be you. And the last one is use your time well, right? Time management couldn't be more important. On the right, you will see kind of like a little bit of a journey of a student who's kind of like done a few different things. And this is the sort of trajectory that has gotten him into university. It's not the same for every kid. I will say that. But by and large, the more exposure you give to your kids, the more they will see, the more they will know, the more they will know about themselves, about what they want, about who they are, about what their interests are. And, isn't that the most important knowledge of all? Knowledge about yourself. So I feel that that's something just to keep in mind. I'm going to open it up for questions. If for any other like personal questions, you can also reach out to my colleague Millie, and I'll put that on the chat. But any questions on the chat for now? Can ask me anything at all. I just got a DM. Okay, the question is, how do I know what subjects to choose, what curriculum to choose for my child? My child is debating between AP and IB. Which one is better for my child? Okay, great question. Subject selection is, again, not something I'm going to discuss too much today, but by and large, the IB and the AP curriculum are very different. The IB curriculum focuses a lot on essays and essay writing and essay analysis, whereas the AP curriculum is more straightforward. It's a little bit more of Q&A, question and answer, a little bit of a different testing style. That's really the difference. If you're good at writing, you like analyzing, you like essays, go for the IB. If you're a bit more straightforward and you sort of are more direct as a person, go for the AP. Try to know this before you choose your curriculum because it can really impact your grades. The IB is not for everyone. I want to really mention that. And universities care more about whether your grades are good or not than whether you take the IB or not. Please keep that in mind. Okay, I see a question here from Chloe. Is rock climbing good activity for applying to university? So to answer your question, it sort of depends how involved you are with rock climbing. Have you been rock climbing for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? Has it been a continuous journey? Have you done any competitions with rock climbing? Have you done any impact or any kind of projects with rock climbing? I would say as an activity as a standalone, probably yes, it's a good activity, but give details on the impact, give details on the tenure, give details on, and if you can, Chloe, try to get a leadership position. You know, I hate to say this, but unfortunately, still universities look at leadership position. They will look up, they would prefer an application where it says captain of rock climbing versus rock climbing member. And this is where a lot of kids get it wrong because they think that getting internships is more important than putting leadership positions, but actually leadership positions is more important. They want to see who you are. Anyone can get an internship via connection, but not everyone can do leadership positions and projects, passion projects. So the short answer is yes, but it depends. So maybe you can PM me with a little bit more detail and I can give you a little bit more analysis. Any other questions about activities, about, personal statements, about Chinese? Someone asked me a personal question about Chinese and English. Okay, I see another question here. My sibling is into sports and might choose to change my course to pure academics by grade 11. But I don't know if it's too late at this point to help him out. Somebody's in. Okay, so from the understanding of this is they're in a sports curriculum, but now they're changing, they might change to pure academics. So to answer your question, it's never too late. Like, I've worked with students who are in grade 12 even, but the earlier you start preparing, the better. If they're considering IB, I would say that try to decide earlier rather than later, because it's just something to kind of keep in mind, right? Because the IB is not a very easy curriculum to just dive into. It's something that does require a little bit of mental preparation. So I would say the sooner you can, the better. Try to, maybe even if you can in the summer, prepare him into IB. We can also do that if you'd like. But that's just something to think about. It's never too late, right? But it's usually better to be early than late. That's something that I would say. The earlier the better, right? With everything. If I had children, I would start at grade 7, I would say. Yeah, probably I would start at grade 7. And I'm not embarrassed to admit that, because I think that there is a demand and supply issue, and there's so much demand for good universities, but the supply isn't increasing as much. And that's just something to kind of note. Any other questions?
Debbie, one question that I know that we get a lot is how do I find things to do
Mm.
outside of school ECAs? And there's so many options around the world and different things that you can do online, offline, whatever it is. How do I choose the ones that are potentially going to actually be useful? And I know you've spoken about a breadth of diversity in terms of in terms of the Common App at least. But is it sometimes useful to sometimes double down on something and actually show that you have interest in something as well?
Yeah, great question. Actually, we get this a lot from different students as well. It's important. It definitely is, like, to your point, to show in-depth interest in something, that and continuous interest, not that it's just a one-off thing that you're interested in. That's really important. And so to the extent that you could identify those earlier on, of course, that's better. You're right. A lot of kids struggle in terms of like finding those activities. I personally feel that entrepreneurship, and it doesn't have to be an entrepreneurship course, it could be an entrepreneurial experience, is a very good way or a very good avenue to figure out what you like and what you don't like, because it teaches you a lot of soft skills. So I think that's always a good starting point. I think outside of that, exposure, go play sports, go to camps. That's how I grew up actually. Like, I don't think I had a month, like a summer free. I was always pushed into camps and random things, right? Not academic camps, but like, one summer I was in Serbia playing basketball, another summer I was in a jewelry camp, another summer I was doing like entrepreneurial stuff. So I was always like kind of learning and like doing things and getting busy. Another summer I started a jewelry business. So I learned how to do beads and things, and I would go to different houses and sell jewelry. Then I would sell it to my teachers. So I feel that I got exposure to what I like, what I don't like. Ironically, now I don't care about jewelry. But back then, I thought it was really interesting. So I think that exposure element, Ethan, is super important. Sometimes I feel that, and probably the parents on this call feel this too. Sometimes parents feel the school is supposed to give exposure. Sometimes the school feels the parents are supposed to give exposure. And sometimes no one ends up giving exposure. So I feel that because there are so many stakeholders involved, as parents and as students, it's our duty to kind of like take responsibility of our own learning and figure out what we're keen on, and what we're not keen on. And it's okay. Like, I think this is another important thing that parents, you should say to your kids. It's okay for you to do a camp and then you don't like it. And it's okay, because that's knowledge. That means that this is not something I want to do. Recently, we had a student who wanted to start a finance course for poor kids. And she did a few courses and she realized, I hate this. It's not fun. And now she changed that to a game, and she built a game and she loves it. So you see what I mean? It changed the medium. The medium went from teaching to gaming, right? And she loves it, right? We have another kid who built a game, Kabir, for spaceship acquisitions or something like that. And he's going to present that to a gaming CEO, a gaming company. So I think that exposure is really, the mom might be on this call. I don't know if she is, but the exposure is super important. And I see like actually so many people DMing me now, that they really agree with that. So yeah, I think that's something that we can do a bit better job. Feel free to also follow our Instagram page, because there are a lot of free opportunities that we offer to our students and just the world, actually. So that's something you can check out. Any other questions? And on the chat, I think RT and Kajil have put their WhatsApps. So if you guys have any questions about their kids' journeys, that's very interesting. RT's daughter is at Penn. She went through the IB program. She did her projects. She's been through it from a parent perspective. And then Kajil's son is also in university. He just started. He scored really well in the IB, and he did an amazing project during COVID. So if you have any questions on those particular journeys, we're more than happy to help and answer any questions. Oh, by the way, also to those on the call, we have an essay guide and we have a profile guide. So if you would like to get those guides, just email Millie. So Millie's email, and just put guide request on the email, we can send you a guide, which is a different profiles of different kids who've gotten into university, and then an essay guide. I can actually show you what it looks like. These are really things I wish I had, by the way, when I was applying to college. I had nothing. Okay, so this is a guide. It's basically just like successful application to Cambridge. These are the subjects the kid did. These are the grades. These are the projects. These are all the positions. This is a student who got into Carnegie. These are his grades, his SAT, his profile. This is really useful knowledge because you can study what we have, what we don't have as families, right? And then we also have this. Oopsies. We also have this, which is a college essay booklet, which is, different essays. This got into Boston, this one got into UPenn, and this one got into Northwestern. It's just insightful to see kind of how these students write their essays. Okay, I see one more question here. Applying for good American high schools is better for application either than Singapore International School. If a student's pretty good at science and maths, better take the AP. Sorry, I don't understand the first part of the question. Applying for a good American high school is better than applying to Singapore. Oh, okay. Where are you applying from, Chloe? Do you know what geography are you applying from? Because that would depend. To your second question, if a student is pretty good at science and maths, better to take the AP. Yeah, if the student is better in STEM, do the AP, don't do the IB. If you're better in writing, do the IB. The IB is all writing. Even if you do math, like not math, but even if you do sciences, there's a bit of essay writing. So unless you're like really, really good at essay writing, do the AP. Okay, if you want to apply for college, American high school or international school, reach out to me privately because so I know the process of applying to US boarding schools like Andover, Deerfield, Choate, those kind of schools. There's a particular process. There are a few things you need to do. You need to do your SSAT, you need to do your activities, you need to do your essays. It's kind of like applying to college, Chloe, but like a little bit less intense. Let me see if I have it here. I can show you quickly. Okay. Sorry about my screen. Okay, Chloe, this is a student who's applying from Indonesia to boarding school. So these are the things we're doing. We're doing 2 impact projects, we're doing the SSAT, and then we're doing the essay support. You can do this on your own, of course, but I'm just telling you what you need to do. So obviously you need to do some projects for boarding school before applying to boarding school. And, you need to do some research and you need to, do a few other things. So if you're keen on a particular school, let me know or let Millie know, and we can send you some information on that. If you're applying to a Singapore school, it's a little bit easier. You don't need to do all of what I shared with you. But it depends. It depends on a few rules, actually. On quotas, whether you're a Singapore citizen, whether you're an expat. If you know the names of the schools, let me know and we can see who we can introduce you to. All right, guys, any other questions?
I think that's
Hope
a
today
really
was
good place to
helpful.
wrap up, folks.
Yeah.
If you have any more questions, please feel free to email us. I will put all of our emails in the chat so that you have the option. Obviously, reaching out to Millie to grab some of the info. But Devi and I will also respond to anyone who reaches out to us at the same point in time. So reach out. We're happy to help and we want to help. We know this is confusing. We know that this can get complicated. I think even just working through 1 or 2 hours of this on a webinar can be really, really challenging as well, because a lot of it does depend on a lot of different factors. So we're really focused on trying to give you what potentially the 60 to 80% of you need at this point in time. But we know that some of you will need a lot more personalized at the same time too. So would love to thank you, Devi, for being our panelist tonight. Thank you so much for all the information that you provided. And obviously to all of our attendees, we really appreciate you being here on a school night, of course, and attending in December, close to Christmas too. So thank you for your time. We really appreciate it, of course, and reach out if you'd like to. I've popped everything in the chat.
Thank you all. Hope you guys have a nice evening. Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, attendees. Thanks, everyone.